Hey friends, hope the morning's treating you well. Hope you got your coffee if you want some coffee. I left mine at the house, but I've had plenty. I was going to drive out, stand in a field somewhere and talk to you guys outside. I was looking forward to getting out, but it's just way too cold again. So I figured I'd try this here in the car like we did last week. Kind of enjoyed that. Nobody complained. But I was in a conversation with an old friend of mine a couple days ago, and they told me a story about me that I forgot about. And I figured I would share that with you. This is for anybody out there who's ever worked in the construction industry, the trade industry, anybody who's ever had to deal with such folks. This isn't a wide sweeping, I'm not saying everyone in that industry is like this, but I think you know that this exists out there. And musicians tend to find their way into these particular industries. Back in 1989, I was living in Fountain Square. It's a neighborhood near, just barely south of downtown Indianapolis. At the time, it was a not so popular part of town, and now it's very popular. It's just one of the hippest parts of town. But in 1989, I ended up walking outside, me and a buddy of mine. I was living with 8 other guys in a house there, and that's a whole different story. But we were walking down to this liquor store on the corner because they had a pop machine outside where you could get a root beer for $0.25. And so we go out there and get that. We're walking out there in this old pickup truck. I mean, like a Sanford & Son pickup truck comes rolling up behind us, and the guy's like, "Hey, you guys looking for work?" And one thing you can tell from me, I'm never looking for work, but sometimes bills are due and I have to do some work, but I'm never looking for work. And we're kind of like, not really, man. What you got in mind? And he's like, I pay you guys $3.50 an hour if you want to come over and help me do some roofing. And we kind of ho-hummed around and thought, what the hell? Now, tells you how different the times were just in 1989. A strange guy who we'd never met, who had like a bunch of rough-looking guys in the back of a pickup truck drive by and make some weird offer, and we get in the truck with them. They're total strangers, and we drive off with them. So we drive off. We end up at some warehouse that was just north of Fountain Square. I don't know where it was. I really wish I could remember. We get there, and they're doing industrial roofing. It's not shingles. It's a rubber roofing. Those of you who have done that know what I'm talking about. But it's big sheets of rubber that you glue onto the top of these warehouses to re-roof them. And so we get out there, and the guy's like, come on up. I'll introduce you to the guys. And we ended up climbing up the ladder, getting on the roof. And the guys on this crew, there were probably 6 or 8 of them. A couple of them had ankle bracelets like the monitors on. And everybody, I don't know, it's hard to describe the folks, but I was the most clean cut amongst them. And they're all like looking at me real weird and quiet. And I'm like, hey guys, how you doing? And this one guy, he's like, time to get a new bucket out. So he has this big 5-gallon pickle bucket full of adhesive, full of glue. And he pulls the top off, a brand new one. He gets down on his hands and knees, puts his head down above there, and just like breathes in a big inhale of this glue, and then sits back on his knees with his head out like that and just goes silent for like a minute with his eyes closed. And I'm just kind of looking around like this, and everybody's standing there watching him and smiling. And he finally exhales, and I said, so who's in charge up here? And everybody points at that guy that just inhaled all that glue. And then one by one, everybody else on that crew got down on their hands and knees and stuck their head in that pickle bucket and sniffed the glue. And then it was my time, and somebody's like, hey, man, you gonna get on some of this? And I said, oh, man, I'm trying to wait till afternoon every day before I start hitting the glue, but I appreciate it. And they kind of look at me all quiet, you know. Sometimes when I would say a joke, I'd try to break up the craziness with the tension. I'll try to break it up with a little bit of a joke. And man, it was like the Darlings on the Andy Griffith Show. Those sons just sitting back there with the blank stare. And I asked somebody, I just asked, so you ever heard anybody falling off the roof? And we're good 25 or 30 feet up high. And somebody's like, well, the first time I fell off the roof, which kind of caught me, it wasn't, I once heard of a guy, it was the first time I fell off the roof. And he tells the story about that. And I said, what do you mean the first time? He's like, oh, I've fallen off 3 times. And then the next guy, oh, I've fallen off twice. How long you worked here? 3 weeks. And they all go one at a time, and they all have fallen off the roof, every single one of them. And I was like, how do you fall off the roof that often? But I'm thinking about their sniffing glue or whatever. And so they just told me flat out, if you stay here for 2 weeks, you will fall off the roof. And then the foreman, the guy in charge, looked at me or whatever, he goes, but just know you'll be fired before you hit the ground. And everybody like, ah, ha, 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 laughing and all of that. And so I worked that job for a few weeks. I would go, I would have to be the guy that would carry up the buckets, which are heavy as hell, carry them up a ladder, set them up on the roof, and then get over. It's just leaning against the side of this warehouse. And that's the scariest part, is when you're up on the top of the ladder with nobody holding it, of course. Then you got to reach over and step onto the top of the warehouse. That transition coming up and going down was just always awkward as hell. And you're ready for something really, really bad to happen. And luckily it didn't. So I'm really good at getting along with people, and I'm really good at kind of just mingling and fitting in. So I'm trying that. And I'm in my early 20s, you know, and I'm trying to play guitar and figure all of that out. And I have to have money. It's $3.50 an hour. And that wasn't very much back then. But when you don't have a college education, when you don't go looking for jobs, you know, you go down to the liquor store and somebody pulls up and offers you a job, that's the kind of job you get, $3.50 an hour. And I've had these visions ever since then, really, of, because I've worked a lot of jobs like that over the years, but I have these visions of, you know, you watch Bob Vila or what's it called? The guys from Boston on the, you know the name, I can't think of it off the top of my head. Not the Yankee Workshop, PBS show. Damn, I can't think of it. You watch those guys, and I'm like, where are they at? Why can't I work for those guys? Those guys are serious. Those guys are knowledgeable. They treat you like a human being. Where are those guys at? You know, and didn't end up really working with too many people like that. I've met people on those jobs like that were smart, and maybe they were just slackers. They didn't really want to go. I can relate to that. I have a little bit of that in me. And the people who are just completely driven to want to achieve something, those aren't always the most fun people to be around. But when somebody's really smart, has a wide breadth of things they care about, art, they can talk to you about things that are important, you know, ideas and things like that. And you marry that with somebody who's not very driven, that's somebody I usually like hanging out with. You know, that's probably me in a lot of ways. I enjoy those people, and they end up underemployed in these situations. There was none of that at this gig. And I remember at the end of the first day, a couple of them asked me, so, how did you end up here? And I said, well, since I was a kid, I've always been really passionate about roofing. I dreamed of one day coming up and learning the ins and outs of rubber roofing. And I just let that hang there kind of deadpan. And there was a silence as they looked at me like the darlings. And then one of them comes over and I think it's the foreman. He says, Otis, you're not really like the rest of us. You don't fit in here very well. And I paused a little bit. I said, hey, Ronnie, that's one of the nicest things anybody's ever said to me. I appreciate that. And we kept going back every day. And it's the weirdest thing. If you do the absolute minimum, just be like just a tiny functioning human being, just on the least bit. You show up on time, you have a pulse, you just kind of like do most of what somebody tells you to do and don't make a big deal about it. You stand out so far ahead of everybody else on the job site. Like the bar's so low. There wouldn't be 3 days in a row where all the people would show up. People just didn't. They just missed days. Who knew why? Because they got arrested for some parole problem or whatever. And but we kept going. Got to make that $3.50 an hour. And I had to pay my rent, which was probably, my share was probably about $50 a month right then. So I had to come up with that. When you're living with a lot of other guys, that's the way it is. But the last day, me and my buddy showed up, and this is in October, I believe, when we did this. Just one day we show up and we get up on the roof, and it's freaking cold. And it was really nice autumn temperatures the whole time we were there, just putting down we were on the same roof the whole time. And putting down the rubber roofing, and maybe we were on a couple different ones in the same area. I can't remember. But one day it was just freaking cold. And when you're 30 feet in the air, out in the open, and that wind comes whipping around, it was just really cold. My buddy looked at me. He's like, I think I've had enough of this. And I said, I'm glad you said that, because I know I've had enough of this. And I said, I'll see you guys later. And they were like, oh, it's been good knowing you. We walked down the ladder and walked off. Never saw any of those cats ever again. But worked jobs like that. And, man, I don't know. I'm still trying to think of the name of that PBS show, and it's really, really bothering me. And I'm going to get about 800 people telling me in the comments, and that's cool. But you guys have had those gigs. I know you have. A lot of you have. If you haven't, then good for you. I envy you in some ways. But I was telling Amy, I'm like, I don't understand why people don't just like go with some of those crappy jobs when they need money right now and they got to do something. It's like, man, they end up with these stories. These for the rest of your life. He's like, why the hell would anybody do that for a damn story? I'm like, you're kind of right. That's a pretty good argument you're making there. But my point of all of this is this friend of mine told me this story, and I hadn't thought of it in over 20 years. And so I've had enough experiences that were strange and weird and crappy in my life, and some wonderful like that I could completely forget about that one. And those guys with the ankle bracelets sniffing the adhesive out of the 5-gallon pickle buckets. And I'm not sure how I forgot it, but it all came back. And I thought, I'm going to tell somebody before I forget it again. So I've told you guys. I do want to hear about your stories like that, though. And I'm going to go inside and warm up. And some Stevie Ray Vaughan stuff right here. Check it out. It was really, really good. Joe Nick Petoskey. I think you'll enjoy it. And I'll see you down the road. Much love to you.